This week on Overtime, we talk about what it means to wake the dead. I'm really excited. It's a great conversation. We're also giving away a mug, so go ahead, like, subscribe, and let's get at it.
Welcome to Center City Overtime, a weekly podcast where we take a little more time to dive into Sunday's message. And today, before we even get into the message, we got a giveaway.
We do. We don't even know how we're going to do this, but we've got a couple comments about the mug. So we will give a mug away to, I guess, somebody who comments. So go ahead and comment, and we'll pick a random winner from the comments, and we'll send you a mug. Kind of cool.
Will we send it, or will they pick it up on Sunday?
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Okay. We'll figure it out. Leave a comment.
There'll be no coffee in yours, though.
Oh, no.
Because it's coffee in
You can do the coffee yourself. I think that's to be expected when people win or buy mugs.
I just sipped really loud, so I'm not sure if that came across or not.
It's fine. It's fine. So leave a comment. Maybe tell us how you like to drink your coffee. And first person to comment gets a mug.
Is it first? Okay. She said it. First person to comment.
But still, if you're not first, we'd still love to know how you drink your coffee.
Any platform, too, whether it's Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. You comment, we'll send you a mug. First person to comment.
Okay.
All right.
Here we go. We are just barreling through this Come and See series. But this week it kind of took a little bit of a turn because up until now, all the stories we've talked about have been a lot of Jesus encountering people who are, they seem ready, like they're curious about him. Zacchaeus climbed a tree because he wanted to see him. The woman at the well, I guess she wasn't super looking out for him, but she had already heard and studied about the Messiah and was kind of ready for that. But this week we have Jesus encountering a dead man.
Absolutely.
Just a little of a switch. So we talked about Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. And I thought it was a heavy message just because when you're talking about dead things, there's a weight to it. But it was also, at least for me, just kind of a good kick in the booty to take seriously the role of being a Christ follower in this world. And so before we even get to the miracle, you said something that just messed me up because the disciples kept talking about how Lazarus was sick and they needed to go see him. But Jesus was the only one who would actually speak about the possibility of him being dead. And you talked about how we often don't even want to address that possibility. Will you share what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think that's why this week was so heavy of a message. I think, like many of you watching, most of us have been around people who have navigated death, if we haven't had to deal with it even in ourselves. I know death has been an unfortunate kind of an unfortunate kind of nuance of getting older. The older I get, the more it seems like death.
Yeah, it's a reality.
Yeah, it's a reality. And not just even physical death, even specifically spiritual death, just to see people kind of settle and set and their hearts kind of turn cold and numb and willingly step away from a relationship with the Lord. And we don't know how to handle it, because our perspective is not biblical. As children of God, we have a tendency, if we lean into a secular perspective towards death, we can't do nothing about it. It's none of our business. We should just keep the word out of our mouths. And quite honestly, even the thought of the word brings us fear. So because of that, we're very standoffish. And to say the word or to navigate or to kind of make any comment that even suggests that death may be engaged in a moment brings fear to our hearts. So we just rather avoid the conversation. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it was brilliant that Jesus, in the middle of this conversation about his sick friend Lazarus, went to a place that I'm sure everybody was going to already in their mind, but no one wanted to say. So he's the first one to say, and by the way, even though you haven't said this, his sickness will not result in death. And I think, again, that might have thrown the disciples back. Mm-hmm. Wait, we were just talking about him being sick, but I'm sure in the back of their mind, they were all thinking about it.
Yeah. So you mentioned that physical death is certainly a reality, but also spiritual death. What does spiritual death look like in our world?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that when people are walking spiritually, for the sake of this conversation in particular, I would almost say blind. That spiritual death is more like a lack of being able to see God. I say that, and I'm really intentional, because I don't believe theologically that there's ever this place where we are absent from the presence of God. The psalmist even says, even though I make my bed in hell, you're there with me. And scriptures really powerfully paints this persistent presence of God that just follows us, that's close to us, that's all around us, that's in us, that's around us, that shows up when we need it the most, that, even if we're not looking, it's there. So I want to make sure that I'm close when we're talking specifically about those who are living yet are spiritually dead. It's not that God is distant, it's that their perspective's off. They're not looking, they're disengaged. And because of the Spirit of God, the way that it functions, again, according to what we read in Scripture, from this place of a gentleman, he's not going to force himself or force you to acknowledge him, but long seasons of not being able to look towards God, not choosing to look towards the things of God, produces death all around us, because the consequence of sin is death, according to what we read in Scripture. I just think sometimes we denote that as physical death instead of the spiritual death that has taken over so many of those who we know. Death in relationships, death in self-esteem, death in the way that we look at ourselves, the death in the way that we look at others, where there's no life and there's no hope, and those things are disconnected because our eyes have not seen and focused on the person of Jesus.
Yeah.
So I know that's a long way of saying it, but does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think sometimes that's like, it's such a spiritual term that it's hard to think, like, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
And
there are those, sorry not to interrupt you, but there are those who have experienced the life that Jesus offered and have chosen to walk away. Then there's those who a gospel presentation has never been made. And I'm just going to be like, the work is not done. There are still people that there's a good chance that there's someone that at your job, at your your school, at your gym, in your neighborhood, one of your neighbors, maybe even in your family, that have never heard a clear presentation of the gospel. Statistically, that is still true today. I think sometimes we get that in our head that we're only, we live in the Bible Belt, so we're only talking about people who have chosen to walk away. No, there's people who have not been given the opportunity to make the church choice in the first place, and it becomes incumbent on us as children of God to make that choice present.
Yeah, I love that. I want to get back to that, but I have somewhere else I want to go first, because I thought this was a really strong point. So we've got our kind of tendency to not even acknowledge death. But then the other tendency that can happen, like when it becomes unavoidable, is a lot of times we like dramatize death, or maybe dramatize is the wrong word, but we make it really dramatic. I don't know, I can't help but go to reality TV when you talk about this, just because some of this is just like my thing, because I used to watch way too much reality TV, and I realized like it's one thing to watch characters who are written and kind of like root for the drama there, but then I didn't like what was happening in myself when I realized, no, these are real people, and now I'm watching this as entertainment and rooting for it. And so that's what I thought of when you didn't bring up reality TV at all, but that's what I was thinking about sitting in the front row listening to you. But we do have this tendency to, sometimes we wouldn't say it out loud, but we are kind of rooting for people to stay dead.
It's okay for you to say.
Yeah, well, I just couldn't think of how to say it, because we're not rooting for death, but like rooting for people to stay dead. Or
I do think we're fascinated by it.
Yeah.
I think death fascinates us in a lot of ways. In modern culture, if you don't think that people are not fascinated by death, all you have to do is turn on the TV, go to the movies, pick up a book, right? Like, there's so much being written around the idea of death, around the celebration of it. And unfortunately, the area that we tend to kind of move into is not just celebrating death, but we have a tendency of commentating on death, which I find even more disturbing. Growing up, there was this, I'm even hesitating saying this because, I'm sure there are people, but I'll say it this way. There was this series of videos that I never was allowed to watch, nor did I have a desire to, that really all it was videos highlighting how people have died these gruesome deaths. And what I found so disturbing about it wasn't even the visual of it, because the visuals were nasty, but the idea, because I've never actually watched one, but the idea that people would commentate on death, like give play-by-play. Even the people in the story, there's this phrase that we've been using for our series called Come and See, where Jesus asks where they've put the dead body, where'd you put his body? And their response is, come and see. They knew exactly where Lazarus was buried. They understood how long he'd been buried, all the reasons why he was buried and deserved to be buried, and why death was on Lazarus. And that's the moment, according to what we read in scripture, where Jesus gets angered. I think he gets angry at their willingness to celebrate, commentate, and just, ultimately even receive death, when he had told them Lazarus is not going to die. So to your point, I do think people do tend to celebrate death. And I think to some degree it's even a nervous fascination, because we don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think, especially that phrase, come and see. Like, I know we didn't plan this out when we started this series, because we actually were only planning for the series to be 3 weeks long, and then it's been so good we kept going. But there's something about the way they use that phrase that I took as a personal challenge, or at least like a point to examine of, do I say come and see Jesus? Like, am I the type of person who's living in the world, and the way that I live and the way that I interact with people is constantly inviting them, come and see Jesus, come and see the Messiah, come and see the one who saves, come and see the one who raises the dead to life? Or am I living in a way that says, come and see to death, like come and see how those people that I knew were wrong turned out to be wrong, or come and see how this person who chose to do something the way I wouldn't have done it, it didn't work out for them, or I think of it as failure, not as death in my head, and
to some degree, look how bad they're doing, or look how, in comparison to how good I'm doing. And I think for so many believers, that's the objective, right? If I can make that person's death stink worse than mine, you're going to notice them and not notice mine.
Right.
And I think that unfortunately is, and again, not all believers. So I want to make sure that I'm really clear here. There are some amazing saints of the faith that have pioneered and have, when it comes to those who are dead around them, they're all about it. And so I don't want to paint this broad picture of the church. But there are some, specifically, again, where we are in 2023, that we commentate on death. And I think some of it's just to cover up our own stench.
Yeah, that's good. Stench, which Martha talked about in the story, how it would probably stink. So I wish I could dive into everything, but I really want to hit on this point you made at the end of the sermon, that God chooses to use the local church, that we do have this, I don't know the right word, like responsibility, but I think it's even more than just responsibility. He's choosing to bring the dead to life through the local church. What does that mean?
We have a bunch of lights in the studio right now. No one ever questions the intention of the light. The bottom line is, it was created to radiate light, period. No one looks at a light bulb and say, man, it could do so many things, but I just wonder what its purpose is. This is my soapbox moment, and I need you to hear me. The church was not created to do anything. And I know this is, people going to jump down my throat for all. Everything the church is created to do points to rescue. Everything. You want to talk about the church and community? Amazing. The church is created within its scope to draw people to personal community. Why? So those who are distant from the Lord can come close and find rescue. The church should be engaged in social issues and should be engaged in community. And we should be the first to feed and the first to clothe and the first to house. We should be involved. Why? Because at the end of it, the people would be drawn to the personal, to a personal relationship with Jesus. This nonsense that we can take the things that we can do to draw people and make it the thing that we were created to do is absolutely diluting the intention of the church. At its core, we are God's mechanism by which he is drawing people to himself. There's a passage that I love that talks about how if he is high and lifted up, the world is, those were drawn unto him. I love that picture. What does he use to lift himself up but the local church? And as much as we get knocked and as much as people want to kind of leverage a bunch of nonsense onto the church, and it's fine, make your YouTube's videos, criticize people, like do what you're going to do. That's fine. At the core of the church, we are the hope for the world. And I'm not making that up. That's based off what we read in scripture. If there is no local church, the hope of the world is diminished. There's not a plan B. So yeah, I'm extremely passionate about reminding our people in particular here in Charlotte, we could either complain about the climate of the city, we can commentate about the climate of the city, or we can be the people that bring the gospel that brings change to the climate of our city. And I'm convinced that our people are ready to do just that.
Yeah, and now is the perfect time for that.
Absolutely.
Because Easter is right around the corner, and what better presentation of who Jesus is than to show up at the time of the year that we're explicitly talking about how he doesn't just raise the dead to life, but he actually himself conquered death in 3 days. Like,
let's go.
I know. Can't wait. Got to talk about all parts of it, but I'm really excited for Easter. And so I would just say, if you're at Center City, I hope that we have equipped you well enough that you can be inviting people. But even if you're watching this and you're part of a different local church, take the opportunity to invite someone to hear this story that this may be their moment. This may be their moment of rescue. And one more thing as we kind of start to wrap up that just hit me in your message. You talked about the story of this team of soccer players who were really miraculously rescued from this cave after almost 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, it's 17 days.
More than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
The number of different people who went into that rescue, each had their role to play. And if anyone had not done their part right, like if someone hadn't navigated getting food to them, then it wouldn't have mattered when they navigated how to get them out. So just know your role doesn't have to be everything.
Yeah.
But each of us has a really important part to play, and that may be you asking how you can pray for someone, not realizing that other people in their lives are also praying for them, and this is that moment, or you inviting someone out to coffee so you can share more of your story and hear more of theirs, or inviting them to church. There's so many parts of that rescue, but we're not supposed to do it all. Like it's something that we do communally together.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Even in the study, they talked about how the local laundromats opened up their laundromats to wash all the clothes of the rescuers that were filled with mud and were drenched, and that local restaurants would open up and make their food available every night for the rescuers, and local hotels would open up and made their hotel suites available to guests who came in to help with the rescue, and how everybody, even to the taxi drivers, would give free shuttle rides for family members who wanted to come to the mouth of the cave, and how the whole community didn't know they all couldn't be in the cave, but they all did their part to make sure that those who were there for the rescue, that they were playing there, like everybody had a part to play.
Yeah. It makes me excited.
Yeah.
To know that responsibility, that there is a part for each one of us, but also that collective, like we're not in this alone.
No.
It's really exciting.
Absolutely.
So where are we headed?
Palm Sunday, right? Like this is one of the greatest come see moments in scripture, where a whole community gives us a foreshadowing. Like what I love about Palm Sunday, it's not just a picture of what our response should be to the news of the King. It's also a glimpse of what it will be when you look kind of forward into the picture that's painted in Revelation of the glorious revelation of who Jesus is and his people and the celebration. So I'm excited about it. Palm Sunday right around the corner, and then Good Friday.
Yep.
Which you kind of spearheaded.
I know, I love Good Friday.
Yeah, you excited about that?
I am. We're going to go through all the statements Jesus made on the cross. So it'll be, again, kind of like this week, it'll be a little bit heavier, but also just a beautiful reflection of this loving sacrifice that he made for us.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So if you are part of Center City, it's a big week because we're not meeting at 10 this Sunday.
9
and 11. Both services will be streaming.
Yep.
So if you're someone who watches on YouTube, those will be streaming at 9 and 11. And we cannot wait to see you then.